Hey guys, this is Sports with Dylan. It happened. It finally happened. Brandon Staley, the coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, was fired. As you can see, I am absolutely thrilled about this because this is just great. You see, Brandon Staley was a terrible coach. For the first part of his first season, I didn't really pay attention to him until his last game when the Chargers were on the brink of the playoffs. They're facing the Raiders, and whoever won would make the playoffs. Whoever lost would not. However, if there was a tie, then they would both end up making the playoffs. But who thought there was going to be a tie? Well, get this. It almost went into a tie. The teams were tied coming into the very, very end of the game. Now, I'm just saying this from memory, so if something's slightly wrong, then that's my bad. But I'm pretty sure I'm mostly right on this. Very end of the game. Now, the interim head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders was willing to stay and wait for the tie. He seemed fine with it. They're starting to run down the clock. So they're just waiting. The game's gonna end. But then Brandon Staley goes and calls a timeout and stops the clock. Why did he do that? I don't know. It was stupid. But he called a timeout, which stopped the clock, which meant that the Raiders brought their special teams unit on, kicked the field goal, won the game, and the Chargers missed the playoffs. That was the moment when I started to hate Brandon Staley. Because of the fact that was a terrible decision. That was just miserable. Absolutely terrible of a decision. It was stupid. I don't know why he did it, but he did it. It was stupid. It did not work out. I do not get it. So that was his first season as a head coach. And if you're wondering, he got fired just now in the middle of his third. Now, last season, the Chargers were better. They were doing quite well, and they still weren't the best team in the league, but they're still playing pretty well. They end up getting playoff berth pretty easily. The Raiders did not even get anywhere close. Anyways, Chargers coming into the playoffs, they were the top-ranked wildcard team, which means that they get to face off against the lowest-ranked divisional team. And that was the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that was on the rise, but still just won an easy division. They weren't seen as much of a threat. And the Chargers showed that, because in the first half, they were up 27-0. Trevor Lawrence was playing terribly. That entire Jaguars team was playing terribly. The Chargers lost that game. Yeah. In the second half, they managed to completely blow it and lose that game. That was another point where I said, okay, they have got to fire Brandon Staley. And there's a lot of talk about it last season. And I think that's when they should have fired Staley. Because had they fired him, they easily should have and could have gotten Sean Payton. Because Sean Payton wanted to go to a good team. He ended up picking Denver, which isn't a bad choice. They still have talent. But LA has clearly more talent. With a young quarterback to work with, good weapons, great defense. This would have been a great team for Sean Payton. But no, let's stick with the idiot for a head coach in Brandon Staley. And that did not pay off. This year, they have sucked. Been way worse than they should be. This past week, Justin Herbert was ruled out for the rest of the season, so Easton Stick will be starting the rest of their games. And that brings us all to last night, when I look at the first score of the football game. It's 7-0 Raiders. First time I looked at the score. That is pretty good already. It was pretty quick. First drive, I believe. And then I look again a couple minutes later. I was busy, so I wasn't actually watching the game. I was just checking the score periodically. 14-0. Then I look again a couple minutes later. 21-0. Then I look again. Couple minutes later. 28-0. Then I look again. Couple minutes later. 35-0. Then I look again. Couple minutes later. 42-0. That is what it was going into halftime. Half of the game, and it was 42-0. Yeah. Not good. That is not a score you want to have at all. And there are people, Richard Sherman, you may know who he is, former Seahawks, Legion of Boom. Anyways, he called for Brandon Staley to be fired at halftime, which he wasn't, sadly, although that would have been pretty funny. But instead, he played out the game, where they end up losing 63-21. Now, to make it worse, it's not like it's an amazing team. Okay, fine, the Chiefs beat you 63-21. This is terrible. But it's the Chiefs. No, it's the Raiders. It's the Raiders starting Aiden O'Connell. And it's the Raiders starting Aiden O'Connell who scored 0 points against the Vikings last week. 0 points against the Vikings, the Minnesota Vikings. That's not even that amazing of a defense. And they scored 0 points last week. This week, they scored 63. So, yeah. That just goes to show how bad that Chargers defense is. And that's the problem. Brandon Staley is a defensive coach. That's what he's supposed to be. And yet his defense was never that good. Despite having plenty of talent. You got guys like Joey Bosa, who's not playing right now, but still a good guy. Khalil Mack, who's on fire this season. Then you've got Eric Kendricks, who is a great free agent pickup in my opinion. Got Derwin James. J.C. Jackson just did not work out for that team. I'll get into him a bit more later. Sanjay Samuel Jr., though, you got plenty of guys on that defense. But it just never turned up. They were never the defense they should have been. And that was the problem. If they go and let him 42 points, that is what's bad. 0 points. Sure, that's not great. But you're starting a backup quarterback, someone who's never started a game before. You have multiple other key pieces missing. So I don't blame them for the nothing part. I blame them for the 42. That is what's ridiculous. So that is what ultimately lost Brandon Staley his job. And clearly, I am thrilled about it. Now, Tom Telesco, their GM, also lost his job. Which, honestly, in that case, it's a bit of a shame. Tom Telesco got his job in 2013. And think of every single player you've ever heard of on the Chargers recently. Yeah, he was drafted by Tom Telesco. And sure, the Chargers haven't quite made it as far as you would wish. But they have made some good signings and trades as of recent. Like the Khalil Mack trade. That one's worked out great for them so far. And there's others. While the J.C. Jackson signing just did not work, but the Corey Linsley signing worked. Justin Herbert was a great draft pick, obviously. But then you've got late round steals like Joshua Palmer. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, both of whom drafted by Tom Telesco, despite it being a while back, have both been two good threats, especially Keenan Allen, who's been a great threat for a long time now. You got Austin Eckler, who is a 7th round steal. You got Rashawn Slater, who's been a star since he was drafted a mere couple of years ago. And a good offensive line led by Jamari Slater, who is a sophomore, who's drafted in the 6th round. You got Zion Johnson, who's also a sophomore, 1st round draft pick. Then in the defense, like I said, these are some good players. Joey Bosa, 1st round draft pick. I mentioned Khalil Mack already. Then you've got Derwin James, which was an amazing draft pick. Asante Samuel Jr., which was a pretty darn good draft pick. Eric Kendricks, which I thought was a great signing. Austin Johnson, Sebastian Joseph Day. I'm just naming players on the Chargers now. But my point being is the Chargers do have a pretty good roster. Which is why I put so much blame on Brandon Staley, because they just weren't working together. But I do not put the blame on Tom Telesco. I thought he did a great job on making that team as good as they could be with Brandon Staley. So it is a shame he had to go, but sometimes that's what organizations need. Change. Now, it will be interesting to see what happens with the Chargers this offseason. What do? Do you trade away a couple older veterans? Maybe ship out Khalil Mack again? Maybe look into getting rid of Joey Bosa or someone like Mike Williams? Someone to free up a bit more cap space? Or do you try and just grab a couple more players so you can truly compete like they should be? The key part is getting a good coach. And what I would do if I were the Chargers is go the polar opposite of Brandon Staley. Someone that's not young. Someone that's not cocky like Brandon Staley is. Because he would just go for things and make stupid mistakes. I would go for an older. Dan Quinn would be my perfect pick. Because he's an older veteran coach. He knows exactly what he's doing. Sure, he's still a defensive coach. Maybe you want to go on the offensive side this time. But either way, just don't go for some young hotshot. Sometimes that's great for teams. Sometimes that's what they need. But I think the Chargers need a tougher presence. Something that can toughen them up and get them properly winning some games next year. But for now, the Chargers are not going to do well for the rest of the year. They have plenty of players injured, as I mentioned. Easton Stick actually showed some promise last night. But with an interim coach and a backup quarterback, I'm not counting on it. Anyways, I will see you guys again soon. Thank you guys for watching. I did that backwards, didn't I?